Thanks for joining us for Season 3 of the Stories Unveiled podcast. Stories Unveiled exists to create a platform for people to share hope through their personal stories of what Jesus is doing in their life. Each episode highlights a different guest just like you and I, wading through this life that can get so messy. I hope this conversation proves helpful and encourages you to go live unveiled. Today, I have Camille Levi in the studio with me. Camille is a wife, mom, professional makeup artist, and realtor. She is one of the friendliest people I know and brightens any room she walks into. I love her heart for truth and her desire for deep relationships. She is one of the easiest people to talk to, which is why I am so excited for this conversation. Camille, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. This is so fun. I'm excited. Feel very honored.
Absolutely. Well, we've been friends for a little while, and I just really wanted to have you on the show. You just have so much incredible insight and wisdom, and you're seriously so easy to talk to. So
thanks. I feel the same about you. It is so fun. We could probably go on for hours. We'll try not to.
Yeah, we'll try to keep this to a short podcast.
Yeah.
But
thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So just kind of start off by telling us a little bit about you and maybe your faith walk. Where'd you grow up and what did life look like? Did you grow up in church?
Yeah, so I am from Idaho, born and raised in Idaho, and I was raised Catholic.
Okay.
We were not just Catholics that go to church on Christmas and Easter, but truly faithful.
Mass?
Yes.
Okay.
So I remember growing up, and my mom was the head of the Catholic Women's League.
Okay.
And she was the head of all of these things. We went to CCD on Wednesday nights, and we would actually clean the church, and we'd go to Mass at 8 a.m. before school.
Oh my gosh. Every day? Most days?
Yeah, almost most days. If they had it during the week.
Oh my gosh.
It was a very, very important part of our life. So we were raised just, definitely grew up in the church and with that strong religious background. And I definitely would say looking back, I'm no longer in the Catholic faith, but I do value the fact that my saying the prayer, praying every day was important, and definitely understanding Bible stories.
Yeah, there are
a part of my life.
Of that religion that you have taken with you.
Absolutely.
It's just changed or morphed, and
totally. Yes,
not Catholic anymore. But
exactly.
But you do still go to church?
Yes, we do. We are God just moved us into a very spirit-filled, amazing church in the last couple years, since COVID times, actually.
Yeah.
During that time, it was just kind of a moving around. I think it was an opportunity for people to kind of reevaluate a lot of things and find where a true home church felt. And we had been in our church at the time for 20 years.
Wow.
And never intended on moving. No, but because there was church at home and people weren't meeting and it was a different scenario everywhere you went. It got to the point where we were okay, we really need to get back into church, corporate
worship.
Yep.
What does this look like for our family?
Yeah.
What does this look like?
I had started homeschooling my kids during that time.
Yeah.
And so everybody was home. My husband was home working from home. I was working from home. My kids were learning from home. Everybody was home. We were okay, we need to get out of the house. And church was the thing. I was we've got to do this. So we needed to find a place that was open and that the kids could go to their own service. Because sometimes at that point, people were doing church with their kids sitting next to them on a device. And I was I can't do that. They need their own church. I need to get filled. I need to be fed.
Yeah.
They need to be fed. And we can't be doing it in the same room.
Yeah. Yeah. We need our own thing.
Exactly.
If we are together 24/7, at least 1 hour a week, we need to be apart.
And that was such a God thing, obviously, because I had no intentions of leaving the church we were at, but I was just open, God, wherever you want us to go, I just want to go worship with people. And I just want to be in that, in your presence with others. And so we did that, and we just ended up staying at the church we found. And so what was amazing through that was that along that journey, people that I was friends with at the time that were not believers were also kind of like, wow, what's happening in the world?
Yeah.
And they came to know the Lord through that. And we ended up going to like, getting saved and like going to church together. And so God just like was doing something. God was on the move. As I think that like the one verse that stands out to me so much in just this whole last few years is, as sin abounds, grace abounds much, much more. And so no matter what's going on in the world, I notice, like, we notice things happening in the news, or, you know, we're like, Jesus, when are you coming back?
And
this is getting bad, you know?
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, but grace abounds much, much more.
Yeah.
So no matter what it looks like, God is moving, and His grace is like abounding higher and more than what sin can do.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, so.
That's awesome. So faith has always been a part of your life.
Definitely.
And it's just morphed, and it's just depending on how it's looked.
Yeah.
So you're married and you have 3 children.
Yes, I have 3 boys.
You have 3 boys.
And as a makeup artist, it's like everyone always asks, like, how is that?
Yeah,
How does
you don't have girls to like...
You don't get to practice and like share these like skills. So that's why I love my clients and people I get to meet that I can teach and help with makeup, because I do love beauty. But I have boys, and they're very athletic and into every sport and music. So
they would never be into makeup.
I want to. I'm like, can I just play? I won't tell anybody.
It's fine. I won't record it. It's fine.
None of that. They don't allow me to do that. But I have 3 boys. I've been married for 22 years, almost 23 years.
That's amazing.
To my husband, Jeremy. And that in itself, obviously, being married for 22 years is like, it doesn't feel that long.
Yeah.
But then when you think about it, you're like, wow, like that's quite a long time.
It is, yeah. My husband and I will be 19 this summer. So yeah, I mean, it's huge. It is a long time.
And I feel like in this day and age, it is like not super common.
No.
Yeah, so I'm really grateful.
To choose and to fight for love, but really, because it's a choice, I feel like every day to decide to be in it and love your spouse, but to choose marriage, to choose the covenant that you made. And
Yeah, early on, I would say, like, when we were first newly married and we're figuring this out, and my oldest son is married now, and so
there's no way, and I already knew this, but I just have to point out, like, there's no way that your oldest son is married.
Yes, I had my oldest son when I was 15, so there's a whole story and testimony there of God. He's definitely my little guardian angel, and like, God knew what I needed.
Yeah.
Just enough to put me back on the right path. And so, also, I'm like, gosh, you don't think about these things when you're going through them, but sometimes you're going through like the hardest thing in your life, which is obviously like one of the hardest things was being a teen mom and being...
Yeah, you were in high school.
Yeah, I had my son, I was pregnant at 14 and I had my son at 15.
Oh my gosh.
I graduated high school at 16.
Wow.
And started college at 17. And so it definitely shook me up in a good way, to where I remember somebody saying, like, you know, this isn't about you anymore. And that really like stuck with me. I'm like, okay, I need to figure this out.
Yeah.
But it wasn't even me figuring it out. It was just me like surrendering and not trying to, I guess, do it my way anymore. And I was like, okay, now I do want to surrender into asking for help and seeking what is right for this little guy.
Yeah.
Because it's not about me anymore.
No.
And you quickly find that out when you're a mom. And so, yeah, it was definitely one of the things that I would say, like, it taught me that I can get through anything.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's not the last hard thing I've been through, but...
Totally.
Those things are what you're like, okay, I've been through this and I'm on the other side, and now I can honestly say that, like, if I can get through that, I can get through anything.
Yeah, well, and it's what's shaped you.
Yeah.
And now you have that as, I mean, it's his story too, right? Yeah. But you have that story too about what you learned through that and who you were after all of that, and then, you know, getting married and having this son, and Then we'll go on to talk about your other two boys, who also have a story, in this along with you. But it's just amazing the story that God writes for us. That we're in it, and we're the main character of the story that He's writing for us. And while we do have free will, it's also amazing to just know that like He's guiding us through that and has a plan.
And opening and closing doors. And I think that it's so important for people to realize, like, and you're in the storm of things, and it feels like all things are crashing down. Like, eventually when you are on the other side of that, like, you will understand why, and you will be so much stronger. It is not a cliche. Like, it truly does make you stronger, and you can let it like pull you closer to God, or you can let it pull you away. That's definitely been like something that I feel like has been a learning experience through good and bad. But if you seek God, He will turn everything out for good. And I think that's like I think that's like the summary of my story in general, of just not doing things right. Who's perfect? Nobody really. Like, so, I mean, whether it's like your kid going through something, and you're watching them walk through like bad choices, like my mom and dad had to walk with me through that. They never turned their back on me, which was huge. I remember at that time, my parents, who I owe so much of my like solid faith to, they didn't really listen to anybody else. They truly listened to God. Instead of like what the world was telling them. And I would say that was a huge factor in determining how successful I became and like where I'm at today, because there's a lot of people have opinions over like what you should and should not do if you find your kid in a situation where, like me, I was like pregnant at a young age, and my parents didn't listen to anyone except for God.
They sought the Lord.
They sought the Lord, and
how would we walk? And that's the thing, is not even how do we handle Camille? What do we do about it's like, how do we walk alongside our daughter with this? What does this look like?
And even though the circumstances are tough right now, and they're having to deal with all of these things that they didn't ask for, they really were like praying for my future. And like, okay, how can we set her up for success now so that later on she and our grandchild are going to be the best that they can be. And so I truly think that that was a huge part of it. And sometimes it means like they sacrificed a lot for me, but I'm so grateful. Like, without them, I would not be, where I'm at. And God, honestly, through me having my son at such a young age, it really challenged my parents in their marriage. It challenged their faith. So like, I was part of their story in them coming to the Lord.
That's amazing.
So like, through that whole process, we all came to the Lord and were born again, like around the time that my son was born.
That's amazing.
And like,
and then what a foundation for your son. To have that. So
even though it was definitely like hard, like those moments were so rough, and it's exactly what we needed though, to get us to really evaluate what mattered. And our relationship, and us seeking like a true relationship with Jesus, was like what we all were wanting. We were all wanting just peace. And that's like the only peace we could find was from God at that time.
That's amazing.
Well,
and we're just getting started.
I know. There's so much, so many details.
I know, so many things.
It's a juicy story. Like, Camille, we should just have a movie. We could do a series. Camille's life.
Oh man, life is so much better than a movie though, because we get to see
all real.
It's all real, and we get to see where God shows up all the time. And the big things, the little things. Okay, so we know you had your son at 15. But you have two other boys. And those boys, you and your husband have together after you guys got married. But in a little bit more of a unique situation as well.
Curveball.
Your boys are adopted. And they are so beautiful. They are so handsome. But tell me about what led you guys to adopt.
So when you have a child at 15, you're like, okay, that's not a problem. And you're thinking,
yeah, clearly. So
yeah,
you have an unexpected pregnancy. So that's what happened with my daughter. My husband and I, he was not my husband.
Yes.
We got pregnant before we were married. And then it's like, oh, well, oops.
Yeah.
We ended up getting married and, the rest is history. But you think, oh, this isn't a problem. Box checked. Right. I can get pregnant.
Right. Well,
yeah.
Obviously, like, you just never know how your life's going to go and like what turns and twists are going to happen. And that's why, like, when I talk to younger married couples and newly married couples who are, excited about their future and they're planning for their family, I'm just like, whatever God has planned for you, just like embrace it, because you just don't know what's around the corner. Yeah. And so so when I met my husband, he always had wanted to be a dad. He is just meant to be a dad. He's such a great dad, great father, great husband. And we got married. I got married at 20.
So young.
Yeah, pretty young. And before that, I was like, oh, I'm not going to get married. I'm just going to raise my son. We're going to do mission work. I'm going to be a teacher. And then in the summers, we're going to go do,
I'm just going to do this thing for the Lord.
Yes. And I wanted to serve God. I wanted to do missions, all these things. And God knows what we need, right? And he knows what my son needed, and he brought Jeremy into our life. So Jeremy adopted Carlos right after we got married. We went through kind of a difficult, like, custody situation at that time, although Carlos's biological family had not been involved for quite some time. Okay. They decided to step back in after Jeremy got involved. So that was a whole nother, another tangled thing that we had to work through. But God was so good. In the end, I tell you, we could have episodes.
I know.
In the end, my husband adopted him, and we ended up having a good relationship with Carlos's biological dad's family, which was the best case scenario. Like, everything works out for good for those who love him. And that is such the verse that I like put on that situation. So Jeremy and I go to start planning to have our own baby. Yeah,
building a family.
And to be honest, I was actually really hesitant about it. I had Carlos for quite some time, my oldest son, and we took him everywhere with us, and it was just the three of us. And I knew and I felt that, like, tugging of, like, it's time to maybe try to have a baby. But I had just finished college. I had just gone on a missions trip. And I was like, God, do you really want me to do that? I had always had on my heart adoption. Carlos was adopted by Jeremy, and I always felt like I wanted to have my other kids also.
Some form of adoption story.
Some form of adoption. But I had never discussed that with my husband. So he's wanting to have a baby. He's ready. Was married, born ready.
Yeah.
And I had just finished college and was teaching. I was a high school teacher for 10 years. And I was beginning my teaching career, and I was like, okay, God, I cried out to God one day driving to work. I was like, I remember speaking out loud and saying, God, if it is your will for me to have a baby, then change my heart and make me want to have a baby. And if it is your will for us to adopt and for him to open his heart to adoption, then please change his heart.
Because he wanted biological kids.
Yeah, he had never even considered adopting children.
He adopted yours, but past that, he was like, Camille and I are going to have babies, and this is going to be it.
Yeah. Okay. So he didn't know I had prayed that prayer, but I went on my missions trip to India. I came back, and I felt like, okay, I think that we had been married 7 years at this time. So some time had passed. And I was like, I think we need to try. And as hesitant as I was like, okay, God, you'll change my heart if this is right. And sure enough, it did not happen right away. It was actually like almost 2 years, or a year, probably over a year before I got pregnant. And I was not sure about it at first still, just the feeling of it all, and, giving up your body for a while.
You're like, okay, here we go.
But I told him, he was excited. And then around July 13th, that year, it was summer, I ended up having a miscarriage. And July 13th is significant in a minute, because I found out that's my best friend's birthday, and it was just an important day in my life, around my birthday. And I was like, wow, like, I'm really sad. I'm so sad that I lost this baby. And just, it was just unexpected, because you think at 15 when you have a baby that you're never going to have an issue with that. Well, I was like, okay, God, thank you for the experience of knowing what other women are going through, because a lot of women have miscarriages. And I was like, okay, I know what this is like. This is awful. And I can identify and like understand where other women are at if they experience this. So I thought, okay, that's probably why I went through this. And then I realized I wanted to have a baby, and I was like, okay,
because it also put in you the knowledge and the emotion of like, I'm sad, I wanted this, like and so it put that desire for you to know wholeheartedly that you wanted to have.
So prayer answered. I think, you know? Okay, thank you, God, you answered my prayers. So I was like, I've been through this, like, we went to the doctor, like, they're like, nothing's wrong. This is very normal. It's very common to have a miscarriage.
I think it's like 1 in 4 pregnant women will experience a miscarriage.
So I was like, okay, that's, as awful as it is, I am thankful I went through it. And then we get pregnant again, and I think I got about 8 weeks in, and another miscarriage. And so I was like, okay, well, 2 is not uncommon. It is not, and I had not been on birth control or any of that. I actually stopped it right after we got married. So I was like, well, can't be the reason, sometimes you're trying to find a reason. And I went to the doctor again. I was like, is there anything we can do to like learn more about my situation and help? And I started doing a lot of research myself on miscarriages, and there isn't a lot out there, or at least at the time there wasn't. And so they were like, no, until you've had 3, we can't really do anything for you. I was like, okay, so I guess we got to go for it again, and we're going to try again. So we did, and this time pregnant again, not too long after. And then I went 12 weeks, had like 1 great ultrasound at the beginning, felt great, and then woke up one day and just was like bleeding everywhere. And we went to the hospital. We had an ultrasound done, and they were like, well, we still see everything, but your HCG levels are dropping. And it's just kind of like, there's nothing we can do.
I mean,
and it really isn't. There's
nothing you can do to stop it. I mean,
such a helpless feeling. And when you really truly realize how little doctors can do when you're pregnant. Like, really. It's so God. It's such a miracle to stay pregnant and to be able to like carry a baby that like full term, and a healthy baby at that. So, you're really realizing how little control anyone has. So after that one, I was far enough along that they had to do like a whole process, like a DNC. And that was really hard. That was really scary. It just is, it's just emotional and awful. Anybody who's been through that. And they did some testing then. So it was the 3rd one, so they could test some things. So they did some testing. I think they found out that it was a little baby girl. And so I did have a girl. But so that was rough. And it was like, okay, the 3rd one.
They finally said that they could start looking into it.
But they didn't find anything, obviously, that was really carried any weight. So I was still taking all the information I could and doing a lot of my own research. I found out that I have what's called the MTHFR gene mutation. And it's super common now. They didn't know much about it at that time, but it has a lot of effects on different women and men. But one of them could be linked to miscarriages. They just didn't have conclusive like evidence in medical journals to support it. I found out that I don't like detox certain, I don't detox well, I guess I should say. There's 1 mutation and 2 mutations, and if anyone has like any questions about any of that, they should look it up, and do some research on it because it's fascinating how much it affects different parts of people's lives.
Wow.
It can lead to depression. It can lead to like heart conditions, cardiovascular disease, all these things. But in essence, like there was no information, so no conclusion in that. So again, we went through, okay, well, we can try this again. So we try again and get pregnant again. And that was the 4th, and lost that baby after a few months, and the 5th.
Oh my gosh.
And then after the 5th, I was like,
I don't know if I can keep doing this.
yeah, I was in a pretty dark place.
Yeah.
I'm gonna cry.
It's okay.
I know a lot of people who go through this. Like,
Yeah.
the feelings are so real.
Yeah.
And you watch everybody, because when you're in that like early 20s and 30s, everybody around you is having a baby.
babies.
So it's really hard. It's like flashing a big mirror in your face like every day. And so I counted on my hands, I think that at that time, like 20 people that I had to come in contact with like on a daily, weekly basis that were either pregnant or just had a baby. And it was just like, I was happy for them, but it's just so hard to know why. And just to ask God, like, how can people who don't even have a regard for you or life, some of them are
blessed,
they're not happy, but they're not even happy they're pregnant, or they're not, they don't want that baby, or whatever, you know, the scenario is. And I've been in that situation, so I get it. But you're just like, why me? And why can't I do this? And what is wrong with me? And you go through the whole range.
And I'm supposed to be perfect in your image, you know, created, and why is my body failing me?
Exactly. So you go through all those emotions, and anyone who's been through that will know. It's hard. And I kept feeling like, okay, I am not a depressed person. How can I shake this? How can I get out of this dark place? I need to do something for someone else. Like, there are people out there that, and you know, I would just like pep talk myself. Like, people have it harder than me. I have to shake this off. Like, I cannot do this, but it is rough. And I'd say that was one time that I felt like I understand depression a little bit now, to know that it's real and it's so hard. And I'm sure hormones were involved in my situation.
Absolutely.
A lot of things.
There's no doubt, I'm sure.
But so I was getting ready to go through like the 5th miscarriage. And in this process, we had changed doctors once. And then we went to a fertility doctor. So I was like, okay, maybe they will be able to help me. And maybe they will have a way to protect the baby, because we can get pregnant. And
you can get pregnant.
And all, like the things that people say when you're going through it is the worst too. Because
I'm sure well-meaning, mostly well-meaning. It's so hard.
And you're just like, that's not my problem. Like, I can definitely get pregnant. So I also learned not to say things to people that you never know. So I was at the time, you know, going to this fertility doctor, and they have you taking like shots every day, like shots in your stomach. And, you know, you think, okay, at least we're doing something, like something different, because we're doing the same thing and not getting a different result, which is crazy. And I'm like, I don't do that. So now I'm with a doctor that I think is going to be the answer, right? Well, we do the shots, pregnant again. And I'm just like, God, please don't allow me to get pregnant again if I cannot have this baby.
Carry to term.
And that was my biggest prayer. And I think my biggest fear in that time was that I would have a full-term pregnancy and then lose the baby, or the baby would be stillborn. That was a thing that I kept, you know, rehearsing too. I was just like, I don't want to think about that, but like, that's my fear. And I go through this new pregnancy. This is my sixth one.
Pregnancy.
And under the doctor's care, the fertility specialist, and I go in for my first appointment, and they say, like, this has collapsed, like the sac has collapsed. You are still showing signs of being pregnant. Your HCG levels are really high still, but you're going to have a miscarriage in the next few weeks. Mm-hmm. And it was the most devastating news again. And
now you were just waiting for it to happen, though.
Yeah. And so at that point, that was probably one of the hardest drives home that my husband and I had. We just cried and drove, and it was just like awful. And I get a phone call on my way home, and it's my mom, and she says, I tell her the news, and I'm just like, this is horrible. And she goes, well, I am so sorry. And she was just crying, and she's like, but your cousin, I had a cousin at the time who was 7 months pregnant, basically full term, like almost 8 months. She just had her doctor's appointment today too, and her baby has no heartbeat.
Oh no.
And I'm telling you, like, I went from just like the worst place ever to like, oh my gosh, she's experiencing my biggest fear.
Yeah.
And I had prayed, God, like, if...
Don't let that happen to me.
Yes. And so I just kept thinking, like, if she has to go through that, I can go through this. Mm-hmm. And it was just like, got me through such a horrible thing. And I ended up, she told me, she's like, she wants you with her. She knows you've been going through this. And so I went to the hospital. I was with her through the delivery. We held the baby. We did all of those things, knowing that I was going to have a miscarriage again. And wow, like God just showed up in that moment, like in that hospital room. Her knowing that I had been through what I'd been through gave her strength.
Yeah.
And her going through that in that moment gave me strength, and we just united. And it was like, we still to this day have like a very close relationship because of those situations. And like, that's what got me through it.
Yeah.
And in the craziest way, that pain that she experienced also just eased mine in a sense.
Yeah.
And vice versa.
And isn't that a part of like sharing our stories? And like being able to be like vulnerable and like say like, this is the hard that I'm going through because somebody else in your life is walking through something similar. Or like you said, how heart-wrenching, but how beautiful that God used two very, very hard, sad, terrible situations, but allowed you guys to come together, and what your trauma and the hard that those situations were allowed you guys to get through it together, though, because
absolutely.
You saw each other kind of walk through it, and it was like, man, if she can do this, I can do this, and if she can do this, I can do this, and because God is bigger too, right?
Yeah, that's why this podcast is so powerful, because our stories, like, we are not alone in them.
Right.
Someone needs to hear it.
Yeah.
If we can get through it, they can get through it. You know. But this was all to get to my boys.
Yeah, I know. So, but that's okay, because we were going to get there anyway. Yeah. So you had basically 6 miscarriages.
6 miscarriages. At this point, my husband and I were at the end of our options. We were like, what do we do?
We're done.
Yeah, I said, I can't keep going through this.
And you can't put yourself through this.
Nope. And we were dealing with that, and it was around fall. It was like October-ish, and he was going up hunting, and I was staying back, and I just said, we need to go away, pray, fast, pray, just seek God and ask God to show us what we need to do.
Yeah.
And we were looking at different options at that point, like surrogacy and just anything.
Yeah.
IVF, like there's so many things now. And he went up to the mountains, and he and I were both praying about what to do. Separately. And he calls me, and he says, I had a dream. And I was like, okay. And he goes, I think we need to adopt. And I was like, oh my gosh. Like, at that point, I had kind of forgotten my prayer about changing his heart.
Yeah.
And I was like, I thought God had answered the prayer in like changing my heart. And in actuality, it was like he changed both of our hearts.
He was working on you both.
Yeah. And he's like, I think we need to adopt. And then he got into service as he called me, and he got a voice message from one of our friends who had already adopted. And our friend just said, hey, I don't know why I need to tell you these things, but I want to tell you all the facts
about adoption.
Give you all the information that I think you would like to know. Tax stuff and just
random stuff
really
that nobody
random.
Talks about adoption, right?
So he's like, I just feel like I need to tell you these things. And he left Jeremy a message. He got that message as he called me saying, I had a dream. I believe we're supposed to adopt. And he gets this other message just confirming what is going on. And 9 months later, our son was born. From the time that Jeremy, around the time he called me, it was just about a full-term pregnancy. And so we just know that our son, Raleigh, he came to us. He was meant for us. Mm-hmm. He was conceived for us. Mm-hmm. His birth mom, one of the things that she said when we were matched with her is, both of my boys are Black. They're African American, and we're not. And we were open to whatever. My husband was like, I have a dream. I think he's going to be a little Black boy. And I was like, well, you never know.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, we're open to anything.
Yeah.
And at that point, our older son was 15. Mm-hmm. So the son I had in high school was 15.
About the age that you
wanted a brother. Yeah, exactly. And I was like, well, we're open to whatever. We're just going to let God choose. But my husband knew, he had a dream of what our son was going to look like. And we were matched with another baby, and that family changed their mind. So that first child we were matched with, our first baby, it was around Memorial time, or around, I guess, May. And I was like, okay, we were matched with the agency. Then with that, them changing their mind, they put us at the top of the list to find another baby to match with. And at that point, it was the little boy at first that they said. And how it technically works is, at least with this adoption agency, is they tell you about the birth mom and her situation, and they ask you if you want to be a potential
adopted parent.
Yep, for this baby and this mom. And then, so that they don't have to change their mind when they go back to them if they put their heart on it. So, but the birth moms get to decide what they want for their child. Yeah. So if we don't fit that criteria or scenario, then they don't show us or talk to us about it.
Yeah.
Well, we were promised the one baby. They changed their mind. We were then asked about another one, a little girl in Tennessee. So I was like, okay, boy,
we're open,
girl,
whatever.
Yeah, we're just one thing after another. You never know what's going to happen. It's unpredictable. Mm-hmm. And then my son was like, no, I want a brother. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, you don't get to choose.
Just like you don't get to choose biologically, we don't really get to choose this way.
You pray about it and ask God to just pray about it. And so he says, okay, well, I did. And I was like, okay, well, we'll see what happens. So the next day, we think we're getting a little girl now, and they call us back and they say, well, actually, you didn't know about this birth mom. We went totally outside the box with this situation because you did not match what she wanted. She wanted a Black family. Mm-hmm. And we just had a feeling that she needed to see your profile anyway. Mm-hmm. So we sent it to her. We told her, they don't know about you, but we just want you to see them. And she looked at our profile and she just said, I know that it doesn't matter what your skin color is. You are his mom and you are his dad. And we got to, she picked us. So they call me back and they're like, we have another little baby. And I was like, can I have both? Can I have twins, a boy and a girl? And they're like, no, we can't do that. So I was like,
You're
okay.
I'll just take all the babies.
Yeah. So I was like, wow, okay. And they said, well, she's picked you, but she knows you haven't picked her. So if you have your heart set on the little girl and you want to go ahead and go with that, that's fine. And I was like, does the little girl's mom know about us? And they said no. And I was like, well, then we want to go with...
Who wants us?
Yeah, we want to go with her. And that was Raleigh's birth mom. And we got on the phone. We had a call for 2 hours, and she just poured her heart out. She shared everything with me and about her scenario. And she's literally the most brave woman ever. I love my boy's birth mom. And she said I reminded her of her Puerto Rican best friend as she grew up in Chicago. And we were matched at that point. So
yeah,
we got our first baby boy on July 13th, the day that I had miscarried my
your first baby.
pregnancy. Yeah. He was born July 13th.
Wow.
Ugh, it's just like
full circle.
Yeah, all the things connect. And this is over 2 years later.
Yeah.
After going through 6 miscarriages, over 2 years, all of those things. And just to get to our little boy.
Yeah.
And he's amazing. He's 12, almost 13 now. He's 5'10".
Yeah.
And 170 pounds.
I know.
He's huge.
Okay, wait. 12, 5'10", and 170 pounds. That's
towers
wild.
over me.
Camille.
He hugs me and like puts his head on my chin. I mean,
puts his chin on
my
your head.
Yeah. But he's amazing. And he is such a gift and also a handful.
Yeah. But he has a brother.
Yes, he has a brother.
And they're biological brothers.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we told his birth mom in the hospital in Mississippi. We said, and we met his birth father and birth mom. We said, if you ever find yourself in this situation again, please call us. Of course, we're on cloud 9 with this baby, and we're so thankful. And we just, you never know. So we said that. We had an open adoption, but we lost contact probably, like a year after he was born.
Okay.
And so we were like, okay. And then, as Raleigh grows up, he's a toddler and he's like a terrible 2-year-old, like a 3-nager.
Yeah.
Beyond belief.
Yeah, it's a real thing.
So people were like, are you going to adopt again? And you're like, have you met him? He's like several kids in one. He's just very, very strong.
Yeah.
Very loud and like full of energy and wild boy and very spoiled. Like he was just like our little, baby guy that we prayed for so long. And so we're like, well, we don't know. Plus adoption's expensive.
Yeah.
There's a lot that goes into it. And so we didn't start that process again. We were just kind of like waiting and praying and kind of not thinking about it.
Yeah, just
anymore.
not actively like, the Lord gave you a baby.
Yeah.
And so you were just living in that moment.
And at that point, I had a lot of goals. I'm very goal-oriented. And I
career.
set these big, audacious goals for myself. And I was like teaching and running for Mrs. Idaho and doing all of these things and starting to do hair and makeup and running that business with my business partner. And so I just did not have a baby on my radar. So I was like, I don't think it's going to happen.
Survival mode.
Yeah.
Like a lot of parents are at
Things
that age.
have changed. Yes. So we're probably not going to have any other kids. So I gave away everything for a baby.
That's the first mistake.
Yep. First mistake. Yep. Gave everything away. Second thing, I sent my husband an email saying, this is what the next 6 months is going to look like. So God, like you make your plans.
And God will go ahead and
God establishes your steps. Like, for real. Like go ahead and make your plans, but
God's going to actually show you what happens.
Yeah, exactly. So this is kind of what happened. Then I send that email. I kid you not, like a few weeks later, I'm teaching high school and I get a phone call from our adoption agency and I'm sitting in the classroom. I go out to the hallway and I was like, what is answer it? Yeah. I'm like, what is going on? So they're like, are you sitting down? I was like, no, I'm in the hallway. I need to, I can't sit down. They said, well, Raleigh's birth mom is pregnant and she wants to know if you want to adopt another baby. And I was like, to be completely honest, like this is real. I was not excited. I was not happy. I was freaking out because I had given away everything for a baby. I had all these plans for my future, my business, like all of these things were happening. And I had just signed up to run a marathon. Like it was like I had planned out my whole year.
You'll never do that again.
I had not been saving up. I had, there was all these things that are flashing through my mind, like this is not happening. But at the same time, like, oh my gosh, like we told her, if you ever get in this situation again, like we want that baby. But it was almost a feeling of like my first pregnancy of like unplanned.
Yeah. The scared of like, what do I do? What do I do?
Yeah, like this was not in my plans. Like I don't know what to do with this. And I tell my husband and he is so excited. And he is not scared at all. And I'm freaking out. And he was like, just,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, this is amazing. And we prayed, and I prayed with my friends, and they were like, we are here with you. Like, we're with you. We've got this. You can do everything. My husband had to sit me down, and he's like, you can still do
all
those things.
Yeah.
All of these things are going to be okay. This is how God wants us to put our family together. This is how we're getting our boys. And it was like, whoa. So I'm like asking, like, when is she due? Thinking we have a few months. In 8 weeks. Like, how are we going to afford this? And again, it's like what God wants, he will make a way for.
Yeah.
Like, we prayed, and it was like at that point, I was like, thank you, God. Like, you know what is going to happen and what we need, and you'll provide for it. And he did. Like, out of the woodwork, people came, they helped us, they gave us baby things. And he was born in 6 weeks. So
oh my gosh.
I had from phone call to a brand new baby in my arms. It was 6 weeks. Like, the money came in.
Wow.
It's just.
God provided.
Yeah.
He used people in your life and your community to make it happen.
And it's like, it's surreal, because when you think back and like how those things all work out, it's literally not anything that I could have ever planned.
Yeah.
And he is the exact opposite of his brother in true sibling fashion.
Yep. I have opposites as well.
Yep. So one is really serious and very logical and like black and white, and the other one's a goofball and like balances him out perfectly. And they're full brothers.
Yeah.
And we got to reconnect with their birth mom for his birth. I got to, for that birth, we got to drive down to Utah for it. I was with her in the delivery room. I got to cut his umbilical cord and be with her the entire time, reconnect, hear about the previous 3 years.
Life,
and understand like what was happening at that point. And they have each other. Like, what a gift that they can like understand exactly what each other's lives look like, and like know that it was like something they share with someone else. So they're amazing.
That's amazing. And that
talented.
was, and he's 9.
9, yeah.
He's 9.
Yeah, he just turned 9. Yeah.
That's incredible.
So many unexpected things.
Yeah.
But
God's used it all.
all of it.
Yeah.
And nobody's life is like what we think it's going to be. And I think that is the beauty of like allowing God to like steer you, correct you, guide you, and just provide for you.
Yeah.
Because it's really in those moments where you're like, this is not my plan. But your plans are better than my plans.
Yeah.
And it truly is. Like, we can't imagine our life and all the pain and all the sadness of the miscarriages that I thought I was never going to shake. It all goes away.
Yeah.
And I love my oldest son, who I gave birth to, just as much as I love these 2 little boys. Like, there's no difference. Like, the adoption versus the biological child, like, there is absolutely no difference in the amount of affection, love, and feelings like that we have for them.
Yeah. And God gave them
the same.
all to you.
Yeah.
In different ways. How he goes about doing that is up to him.
Yes. So.
Wow, that's amazing. And I know that there are like, all of our stories are all so multifaceted, and they're not linear, and we have layers to all of them. And like you said, we could sit here forever.
Just the adoption stories in themselves, I think, are like an adventure.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, everyone is unique and also usually a little bit crazy.
Yeah. I do want to ask, though, for our listeners who, because if we know that the statistic, and I might not even get the statistic right, but I do believe it's 1 in 4 pregnant women will experience a miscarriage at some point. And that's in the very, very early weeks to full term, and everything in between. That's 25%. That might even be higher, but that's what I read last. So inevitably somebody listening to this has experienced what you've experienced at least once. What would you tell a listener who, actually a man or a woman, because men suffer differently, but it's a loss for them too. What would you tell somebody that is facing that really hard grief of miscarriage, and maybe they have had unexplained kind of this unexplained infertility or whatever you have going on with you? Maybe they've never had a baby at all. What encouragement would you give them?
I would say that trust that God is going to see you through that time. He's going to trust him, trust in the Lord with all of your heart. And we don't understand it. Like, you can't lean on your own understanding, but we live in a fallen world.
Yeah.
And even though our heart and our desire is to be in heaven and that perfection that we someday will have, God will work it out for good. He will work it out for your good. There is a purpose in our pain.
And he won't waste it.
He won't waste it. Yeah, not at all. If it's to encourage someone else down the road, or if it's to, welcome a child into your life that you never ever dreamed that, that their birth mom and dad can't take care of, or whatever it is, like, you just don't know what is coming, but you can be assured that, like you said, there's a purpose. It's not wasted, and you will see that eventually. Like, you will see the fruit of it, and you will see the blessing of it, and to just not give up, and trust and hold fast to that God is good even in the hard times. I think I've never blamed God for anything.
Yeah.
But I want to make sure that people know that God loves them, and this isn't the way that it was designed. His plan and purpose for us was not to experience these things.
Right.
But that one day we will have that perfection, and that we'll meet him, and it'll all be made right. But even in that, we can still have things come together for good here.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much, Camille.
Yeah, thank you.
We could talk forever. Maybe we'll have another episode one day.
Yeah, I would love that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us for today's conversation on the Stories Unveiled podcast. We would love it if you would leave us a rating or review. If you would like to learn more about Stories Unveiled and our events, go to storiesunveiledconference.com or follow us on Facebook or Instagram at storiesunveiled_. The Stories Unveiled podcast is created in partnership with KTSY and Barefoot Media Ministries. For more encouragement and other podcasts, visit ktsy.org. Have an incredible day, and go live unveiled.